How'd you get off that hotel roof?
Eventually, the security forces left the hotel. I'd fled up there because I saw them come in. Chucky Taylor was Charles Taylor's psychopath son, and he had these sort of private security forces of his own that were known for torturing people. And I mean, he's a total psychopath. He's in jail and he's in prison in Florida right now for war crimes. But he rode into the hotel on an ATV with an RPG strapped across his back and aviator goggles on and a whole crew of psychopaths behind him. And I assumed they were coming after me. And so I fled up onto the roof. And after those guys left, I just ran. I ran to the embassy and I said, look, they're looking for me and you got to do something. And so the U.S. government actually called Charles Taylor and said, you cannot touch this guy and we're going to get him out of the country. And I was actually gotten out on a they ran a convoy through the front lines filled with people, vulnerable people, and I was one of them. And they busted through the front lines outside the city and through the rebel lines. And they hired local fighters front and back on that convoy to get them through all the way to Roberts Fields, which was the airstrip outside of town. And I got a Red Cross flight out of there. Even on the tarmac, a Liberian official saw my passport and said, "You're the American spy." And I grabbed my passport and started running and I sprinted onto the plane and we took off. It was really freaking close. And I was messed up for months after that. I got out to Paris and I was sitting in the cafe smoking a cigarette and drinking a coffee, waiting for my girlfriend she was meeting me in Paris. And I saw some guys carrying a mattress across the street. You know how hard it is to carry a heavy mattress? and it sags in exactly the same way that a body does, right? A mattress and a body, they're both hard to carry for similar reasons, right? They're floppy and they're heavy. And I saw these guys carrying a mattress across the street. And I saw a mattress, right? I knew it was a mattress, but someplace primitive in my brain reacted as if it was a body. And I went into full-blown panic mode on the freaking ground, right? Even though I knew it was a mattress. Somewhere I knew it was a mattress, but I reacted as if it was a body, and I was back in combat, and I was shaken for the next half hour. And that was, when I wrote about PTSD some years later, I remember that moment where you can tell yourself all day long, you don't need to be scared of this. It's a mattress, calm down. But somewhere deep in your body, you're like, I'm not falling for this again. I am getting on the ground. And it was a real sort of learning moment for me, that moment in Paris.
People always ask, because you get in one of those moments and you have multiple. And then afterwards, the stress coming back out, it was just kind of like calming back down. It's like the energy gets so fired up inside of us in that fuel that it starts burning eternally and just keeps going. Just takes a long time for that stuff to settle down. And then we go back.
Yeah.
And I'd say with someone I heard it explain, it's the same way with a woman when she has a kid. Like that's the worst thing that's the most pain I've ever seen anybody go through. And then a few months later, they're ready to do it again. Like, how do you explain that, man? I'm like, and that's the same way it is with us, with guys like us.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say about combat is if you're a soldier, right? If you're a fighter, if you're a warrior of any sort carrying a weapon, in combat, you're proactive, right? You have agency. You affect the outcome. You're trained to affect the outcome and come out okay. If you're a journalist or an aid worker or a medic or I don't know what, like Doctors Without Borders or Red Cross or whatever, you're in these situations you don't have agency, right? You cannot affect the outcome other than avoiding something bad. So that's both good and bad. There is a potentially a moral burden in killing other people, even enemy, right? But there's also a sense of empowerment if you're carrying a weapon and can protect yourself. I never had to deal with the moral burden of killing, right? I just, God says killing's bad and et cetera. I never had to deal with that. I don't never carried a gun, right? But I also don't have agency. I can't affect the outcome. The only thing I can do is get out of there if things are dangerous. And so the trauma is it's different, and the call to go back is slightly different for journalists or for fighters. Like it's a slightly different experience.
Explain that. So, yeah, I agree with you. I understand exactly what you're saying with that agency and that commitment to getting back in. And it's like, this is what we do. It's that drive to do it. And the experience is experience. It's like the further we go along through it, and it's reading something and then applying it are two different things. And then when you go out there and you apply it, the tougher the situation, it condenses us, man. It sharpens us. It's like forging steel. Like the harder you've been hit, the harder you can get hit. And then when you go back out, you see the situations unfolding, and since you've been in more than what's presenting itself, you remain calm, and when everyone else is kind of freaking out.
You know, there was an interesting statistic that I read, and I'm going back some years in my memory. It was from the Israeli military, and what they found was that the really highly trained special forces who were taking the brunt of the combat on the front lines, they would obviously have a higher casualty rate than the support units. But per capita, they had lower trauma rates. And then the rear base units, they had much lower levels of casualty, much lower risks, but disproportionately high trauma, right? And the theory was, from the Israeli psychologists, was that being highly trained gives you a sense of agency, gives you a sense of being able to affect the outcome of what's happening. And that insulates you from trauma. And if you're in a support unit, you're in a much more passive role. It'd be more like being a journalist. There's nothing to fight. You can't fight. You just have to wait and see what happens.
This is the Team Never Quit podcast. So buckle up, Buttercup.